I've been a doctor in Ethiopia for 35 years now.
Dr. Rick Hodes is an American doctor who went to Ethiopia to help the victims of the famine in the mid-1980s.
So now we have done over 1,500 spine surgeries. We're getting over 500 new spine patients a year. I have the largest collection of the worst spine deformities in the world. We had 3 people show up in our clinic. The husband was very sick, the woman had malaria, and she was pregnant. Malaria and pregnancy is a very bad combination. We put her in the hospital and she needed a blood transfusion. Now, Ethiopians don't like to donate blood. I was going to donate 1 unit of my own blood. I needed one other person to donate blood. So I said, there's a pregnant woman who's going to die. And he said, well, she's not my relative, I don't care. This is like me going up to you right now and saying, hi, my name is Rick Hodes, I need to borrow $300,000. Like you would say, no way. And I said, doesn't anyone give a shit? There's a pregnant woman who's going to die, and you're worried about being tired tomorrow? And I stormed out, not knowing where I was going. Runs after me, grabs me, and he says, doctor, let's go. Okay, my name is Rick Hodes. I am from Long Island. I've been a doctor in Ethiopia for 35 years now. So I'm from this town called Syosset, if you ever heard of Syosset. I went public school in the Syosset system till 12th grade. Then I went to Middlebury College in Vermont, majored in geography. Had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I graduated, had no money and no plans. And that didn't bother me. And the fact that I had no money and no plans really did bother my parents. And the fact that it didn't bother me bothered them even more. The financial support ended. So I had to come up with a plan. So I painted some houses. Then I hitchhiked to California. I spent the summer hiking in the Sierras. I went back to school to the University of Alaska, got a teaching job. And at some point I decided the best thing I could do with my life was to become a doctor. Then I went to medical school in Rochester, New York, trained in internal medicine at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And then I wanted to spend 1 year teaching in Africa. There's something called the Fulbright Commission, and the Fulbright people got my application and they said, you know, we're trying to open up cultural ties with Ethiopia because they were cut off after the communist government took over in the 70s. Okay, this was now 85. So if you're interested in going to Ethiopia, we will send you and we will fund you. Well, nobody else was willing to send me anything and nobody else was willing to fund me. So I took the job and I came to Ethiopia in 1985, intending to spend 1 year here. And I taught 2 different fields, cardiology and infectious disease. And that 1 year actually turned into 2.5 years. And then I said, okay, enough with Ethiopia. I'm going to take a job with the World Health Organization. So I left to take a job with the World Health Organization in Burma. While I was on my way to Burma, there was a revolution in Burma, and the job got canceled. So I had to come up with a plan. So I moved to Washington, D.C., because that's where the international health jobs are hired out of. And I got a job working as a doctor. I just saw an advertisement. I rode my bicycle to a clinic, and I said, you're looking for an internist, and I'm an internist, and I trained here at Johns Hopkins, and I can do the job. So they said, fine. And so they gave me a job, and I did that for a year. And then, while I was there, I got interested more in Judaism. So I come from a non-observant family, and we were very Jewish, but we didn't really do much about it, and we didn't learn much about it. And the Reform Judaism that I grew up with wasn't so impressive, although I have great respect for my Reform rabbi. So while I was there, I started studying more traditional Judaism. And then I got interested, and the one thing about this job is I had complete flexibility. And I could say, next week I'm going to work 60 hours. The week after that, I'm going to be out of the office all week. They didn't care. I got paid by the hour. There was no push to do billing or anything like that. So I started going to Israel and spending time in Israel. And then I sort of became very impressed with the Judaism that I was being attached to. So then I decided I better spend some time in Israel. So in the summer of 1990, I went to Israel, and I intended to do an ulpan and to see what would happen in Israel. While I was in Israel, I was reading the Jerusalem Post every day, and it had stories about the Ethiopian Jews. So what happened was, in November of 1989, Israel and Ethiopia reestablished diplomatic relations which had been broken off after the '73 war. Ethiopian Jews heard about this. They started migrating to Addis Ababa. By the summer of 1990, there was like 25,000 Ethiopian Jews stuck here. So they were in bad shape, and they were sick, and so on. I was reading about this, and I said, you know, I just spent 2.5 years in Ethiopia. Maybe I can help. So I contacted the organization that I now work for, called the Joint, the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee. And I said, you know, I know you work in Ethiopia and you do stuff with Ethiopian Jews. I'm reading about this stuff online, and it says that they're in bad shape medically. You know, I'm a observant Jew at that point, and I speak Amharic, the Ethiopian language, and I just spent 2.5 years teaching in Ethiopia, and I know most of the doctors in the country. Could I help you? So they said, maybe. So they hired me for 6 weeks in late 1990 to be the doctor for the Ethiopian immigrants to Israel. And so I came back to Ethiopia in late 1990 to be the doctor for the immigrants. Then, that was 6 weeks, okay? So after 6 weeks, they called me and they said, well, we don't know what we're going to do with you, but you can stick around for another 6 weeks. Then after 12 weeks, they said, okay, you're doing a good job. You have a job. So I became the doctor for the immigrants to Israel. That was in late 1990. So I started out with like 24,000, 25,000 people, and more people kept on coming, even though they were leaving to Israel at a rate of about 1,000 a day, 1,000 a month. It was going to take, the whole thing was going to take more than 2 years. And then this is under the communist government of Mengistu Haile Mariam. So Mengistu wanted his own weapons and things like that from Israel, so he was trying to put pressure on them, and he would stop the immigration and do all sorts of things. So things were not easy. There was a civil war going on. The rebel armies who were from Tigray and Eritrea, because Eritrea was part of Ethiopia at the time, were coming closer to Addis Ababa. It was not an easy time. Over the years, I've been the doctor for about 75,000 immigrants. So I've been the doctor for about 1% of Israel before they became Israeli. In May of 1990, it was about May 21st, 1991, I was driving to work and listening to the radio in Amharic, and what it said is that Mengistu had left the country. Now, Mengistu had said, I will fight to the last man and the last bullet. And there is historical precedent for that. Who was it, Theodros? Mm-hmm. So Theodros, who had been the emperor of Gondar, I don't know? Yeah.
United Ethiopia to the current.
Right. And he had fought, and then at the very end, he actually ended up shooting himself. And there used to be a picture hanging in the Gondar airport of him with a gun pointing into his mouth. They actually, it's not a nice thing to look at when you're in an airport, so they took it down. But it's certainly part of Ethiopian history. So, we thought Mengistu was just going to fight to the end. But what happened was, he called together his generals and he said, we're going to the south to review the troops. So they got onto the plane And they're on a domestic flight. You're on a domestic flight, you don't need ID, you don't need anything when the prime minister is in the plane with you, right? But once I got in the plane, his bodyguards pulled guns, they pointed to the pilot, and they said, "You're flying to Kenya." The pilot said, "I can't fly to Kenya. This is a domestic flight. We only filed a domestic flight plan." Well, if you have a gun pointed to your head, you might change your mind. So he ended up flying to Nairobi. His friend, the terrible Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe, sent a plane up from Zimbabwe, picked him up, and he flew down to Zimbabwe, and to this day, he lives here. Now, a few years ago, I was at a party, and I met a Jewish guy who was the Reuters newspaper correspondent in Zimbabwe. So, jokingly, I said to him, "Do you ever run into Mengistu?" And he said, "As a matter of fact, Mengistu lives 3 doors down on my block." And he said, "But there's such strong security around his house, he never goes out." So, Mengistu lives in Zimbabwe, and we live without Mengistu, fortunately. So Mengistu left on a Monday. Now, we didn't know what was going to happen. That Thursday, and I know the Israelis had been coming back and forth, and they had been negotiating. There was a guy named Uri Lubrani, a famous Israeli diplomat. And Uri Lubrani was the point person. He had been an Israeli ambassador to Iran, and he was negotiating with the government. And he came back in after Mengistu fled and established ties with the new government. And he and I were friends. And so we would run into each other all the time. And, you know, once we said hello to each other every morning, we would just wave when we saw each other. Well, that afternoon, I was walking across the lobby of the Hilton Hotel, and he called me over. He said, "Rick, we just got the word. Tomorrow is the day. Everybody's leaving." So we were up that night putting together the last details of Operation Solomon, which the Israelis had been working on for a long time. And the next morning, okay, let me tell you a story. That day, we had 3 people show up in our clinic, because I was running the clinic. It was a woman, a pregnant woman and her husband. And the husband was very sick, the woman had malaria, and she was pregnant. Malaria in pregnancy is a very bad combination, okay? Because the uterus, the placenta actually becomes like a magnet for malaria, and it can easily kill the mom and the baby. So you get a pregnant woman with malaria, like that is a super emergency. And she was pregnant, and she had malaria. We put her in the hospital, and she needed a blood transfusion. Now, Ethiopians don't like to donate blood. There is a very nice blood bank here set up by the Swedes. It's quite well run and hygienic, but you're not going to have a blood bank unless people donate blood in. And Ethiopians culturally don't like to donate blood. So the husband didn't weigh enough to donate blood. So she needed 2 units. I was going to donate 1 unit of my own blood. I needed one other person to donate blood. I decided I'm going to go to the Hilton Hotel. Outside the Hilton Hotel, I met a shoeshine boy who I was his client. And I said, "How much do you make in a month?" And he said, $5. And I said, "Okay, I'm going to pay you $20 right now. Come and donate blood with me." And he said, "Sure." So we go to the blood bank. He walks in, and have you ever been to a blood bank? So you see somebody, they're lying there, they have a big blood bag and the blood is coming out. Well, he imagined that this was going to come out of him and never, the Ethiopians, uneducated Ethiopians don't have the conception that blood reproduces, that like we actually get 1% new blood every day. This is unaware to uneducated people. So he thought like, I'm going to give out my blood and never get it back, and I'm going to be like weak for the rest of my life. So he said no. So I said, "There's a pregnant woman who's going to die." And he said, "Well, she's not my relative. I don't care." Okay, I needed to come up with another plan. I go to the Hilton Hotel, and I figured there has to be Israelis here. And I'm slowly walking around the lobby, standing by tables, just listening for Hebrew. there were 3 guys speaking Hebrew. I went up to them and I said, "Hi, my name is Dr. Rick Hodes. I'm medical director of the American Jewish Joint. I need somebody to donate blood for me right now." This is like me going up to you right now and saying, "Hi, my name is Rick Hodes. I need to borrow $300,000. Like you would say, "No way," right? So they look at me. They don't say a word. So I said, "Hi." I repeated myself. "My name is Rick Hodes, medical director of the American Jewish Joint. I need somebody to donate blood for me right now." One guy said, "I can't donate blood." I said, "Why not?" He said, "Because tomorrow is going to be a really busy day and I don't want to be tired." And I said, "Doesn't anyone give a shit? There's a pregnant woman who's going to die and you're worried about being tired tomorrow?" And I stormed out, not knowing where I was going. This guy, the one who was afraid to be tired, runs after me, grabs me, and he says, "Doctor, let's go." And I said, "Why'd you change your mind?" And he said, "My wife is pregnant in Israel." So he's a famous guy in Israel. His name is Boaz Bismuth.
Oh.
You know this guy? He was ambassador to Mauritania.
He's now a minister.
Is he a minister right now?
He's in the now, yeah. He's in the Likud.
Do you ever see him?
No, he's in the government. You see him on the news.
Oh, if you ever run into him.
He's a journalist and ambassador.
Right. So he would remember this. So he was there I think he was there for Yidiot.
Yeah.
And we became friends and we spent the next day together. So Boaz went, he donated blood. We saved this woman's life and put her on the plane the next day. So the next day, we got up. I was actually, the whole thing was based at the Hilton Hotel. There was a lot of tension. There was a curfew and so on. So I was at the Hilton. The next day, I woke up, put on my tefillin and did shachrit in my bedroom, and then went to the Israeli embassy. We called together the group that we called the committee. The committee was like 15 educated people. Now, educated means that they might have had some years of high school. So it's not even, you're not talking about anything. But we said, go to every single house, tell them to drop everything, go to the Israeli embassy, only bring the clothes that they're wearing and any medical records or x-rays that they might have at home, because some of them had their records at home. And then Boaz and I went across town to get this kid out of the hospital. So there was a kid who had both tuberculosis and leprosy, who was in the leprosy hospital. And I tried to bring him out, and the staff said, "You can't take a kid out of the hospital. You need the director's permission." So I went to the director and I said, I didn't want to tell him that the largest airlift in civilian history was starting in an hour, and I needed to get this kid out. So I said, "The Israelis have a flight to Israel today, and they want to put this kid on the plane." He said, "I need a letter from his mother." I said, "Well, how about a letter from the Israeli ambassador? Because the government of Israel is really his guardian." He said, "That would be fine." So I call up the Israeli ambassador. The Israeli ambassador says, "Our fax is not working." So I said, okay. I went back. The team was doing rounds. I picked up this kid and I started running, and I carried him. I kidnapped this kid, and I put him in my car, and I actually had anticipated this, so I actually had newspaper, and I covered him with newspaper. Boaz was in the car with me, and we drove out. As the Ethiopians from the team were running after me, and Ethiopians are good runners. But we made it out, and I got him out of the hospital. And I put him on the floor of my clinic. Now I'm going to tell you another miracle story. If you don't believe in God, you have to believe in God after this. I had another kid who had meningitis who was in another local hospital. And I went to that hospital and I said to the mom, again, we were like in a room, there were 20 patients and everybody could hear everything we're saying. So I said to the mom, "There's a flight to Israel today. Let's go, you and your child." And she said, "No, my brother said to meet him here at 3 o'clock. I can't leave." So I just lied and I said, "Your brother is waiting for you at the Israeli embassy." He must have been, right? And she said, "No, I'm not leaving." So I go back to the Israeli embassy. There's thousands of people, literally thousands of people going into the embassy. It's like people going into the Yankee Stadium on a Sunday, you know? So there could be like a pregnant woman and a man with a kid on his shoulders and another kid in his arms and a blind mother-in-law, all these people walking into the embassy. And it reminded me of the Haftorah that we read on Rosh Hashanah on the second day. Who does Jeremiah say is going to move to Israel and make Israel a great nation? He doesn't talk about Jewish doctors from Syosset. Do you know who he talks about? The blind, the lame, pregnant women, and women in labor. Okay, so all these people are going into the embassy. I walk into the embassy. There's thousands of people around me. Some guy taps me on the shoulder, and I said, Mindano, what do you want? And he said, doctor, you got to help me. My sister is in the hospital. I'm here. And I said, we identified that she's the same person. I said, come with me. And he got in the car. We drove back to the hospital. She looked at him. She said, okay. Got in the car. We put him on the plane. So at the end of the day, I got about a dozen people out of the hospital. There were 39 flights. 14,400 people left for Israel. There was about 10 births. Nobody died. And that was Operation Solomon. And my job, I was on one of the last flights. My job was identifying patients with TB. When I came back, I had another job that was working with the people who had missed the plane. So there are hundreds of people who missed the plane. And then there was a whole other group of people that we couldn't reach. They were from an area called Quara. And Quara is located between Lake Tana and the Sudan border. So we sent in somebody to Quara to meet the Jewish people, and we said, we want you to send one person from every village to us. My watch is going crazy, sorry. Send one person from every village to meet us in 2 weeks at this place in Gondar. And so we met and we got a census. We made a census of all the Jewish people in Quara. And then we said, okay, you go, bring them, and when you want to come, we'll be ready for you. So they came, they got to Gondar, and they started coming. These people walked for up to 8 days to get to us. At night, somebody had to stay up all the time. Do you know why? Because there are literally wild lions in the area, and somebody has to protect them with a gun against the lions. So they got to us. Now, they had been completely isolated. They had never seen a car. They had never seen an electric light bulb. They had never seen a mirror. So they had no idea what they themselves looked like. Isn't that amazing? And when they saw me, their first Ferenj, they said, we didn't know whether you were a human being or not. But then, a lot of people say that. But then I spoke Amharic to them, so they said, he must be a human being, but you have a terrible case of leprosy, which has turned you completely white. And they said, and your hair, it's not human hair. I said, then what is it? They said, it's cat hair. So the kids had a great adventure. And at night, I would teach them Israeli dancing, and they would teach me Ethiopian dancing. We were living together in rural Gondar, in a place called Teda, outside the airport. So one night, we're doing big Hava Nagilas to big circles. The next day, the kids were in my bedroom, and they opened up Time magazine, and they saw a picture of the Ku Klux Klan. And the Ku Klux Klan were wearing their white robes, standing in a circle, holding hands. So the kids came up to me and they said, look at these white men, look at these Ferenges. They're dancing Hava Nagila, aren't they? So the idea of the Ku Klux Klan dancing Hava Nagila has to be part of a Mel Brooks movie. But I thought it was a wonderful, wonderful idea. And then another time, the kids were looking at this magazine. They're looking at these pictures of the world, and it was a picture of Barbra Streisand. By the way, my Amharic name is Muse. So they came over and they pointed to her face and they said, Muse, Yante Afincha, this is your nose. And I said, yes, get used to it. So, and these people are now in Israel. Israel's now 1.5 Ethiopian, and there's still many more people who identify as being Jewish, and that's a whole other story that I'm not involved in. And that's sort of the first half of my life in Ethiopia. So while I was running this clinic for the Ethiopian immigrants, I started volunteering at Mother Teresa's mission, working with the Catholic nuns and working with anyone who walked in the door. So one day in 1999, we met, I got an admission of 2 abandoned orphans who had tuberculosis of the spine. And one of them had a 90-degree angle in his back, and one of them had a 120-degree angle in his back. And I knew that if they didn't get surgery, they'd become paralyzed and they would die. So I wanted to get them surgery, but nobody would touch them. So then I got this brilliant idea that I could adopt them, add them to my health insurance, and get them surgery in the United States. Now the problem is, when you adopt an abandoned orphan who doesn't have any relatives, they become yours for life. So on one hand, I could save their life. On the other hand, we'd have to spend the rest of our lives together. Okay, do I want that much permanence? I don't know any doctor who has ever adopted a patient. And I know a lot of doctors, okay? So I was walking along one day, and I looked up at Hashem, and I said, what do you want me to do? Okay, you ever ask God what you should do? How many people have ever asked God what they should do? Okay, did he answer? Okay, so guess what happened? I stood there, I looked up, the sky didn't open up, nothing happened. 3 days later, he sent a fax to my brain. You guys would call it an instant message, okay? And yeah, so what then the message said, I'm offering you a chance to help these boys. Don't say no. So I adopted them, added them to my health insurance. And you know, like buying an airplane ticket in Ethiopia can cost half a day. So you're talking about adopting somebody. It's, you know, literally, I'm a licensed doctor in this country. I had to submit 60 pages of documents to get a license here. So you can imagine what you have to do to adopt a kid. Anyway, I adopted them, added them to my health insurance, brought them down to Dallas, Texas. Okay, then I had to find somebody in Dallas, Texas. So I've never been to Dallas, Texas. I figured there has to be Jews in Dallas, right? So I go online and I Google Dallas Jewish newspaper, right? It has to be a Jewish newspaper in Dallas. So I get the address, the phone number. I call them up. Hi, I'm an American Jewish doctor. I've adopted 2 Ethiopian black Christian kids, and I'm bringing them to Dallas for spine surgery, and I want to know if anyone in the Jewish community can help us. So I want to take out an advertisement in your newspaper to ask for help. This lady says, doctor, this is a wonderful story, but don't waste your money. Now her job is selling newspapers, selling advertisements. And she's like, I'm willing to spend money for you, and she was not accepting my advertisement. I said, well, what should I do? And she said, call Jewish Family Service and ask them what to do. She said, and there's a woman who just knows everybody. Her name is Janie Schultz. Here's her phone number. So I pick up the phone, I call Jewish Family Service, I leave a message. They never called me back. I pick up my phone, I call Janie Schultz, leave a message. She calls me an hour later. This is Janie Schultz returning your call. How can I help you, sir? I said, my name is Rick Hodes. They tell the whole story. And she says, what a wonderful story. I'll take the kids. Like, this is just some stranger calling. And then she said, but to tell you the truth, in my house, we have 4 small kids, and my husband is the person who's home with the kids during the day, so I need to run it by him, but he'll say yes. So plan on it. So we planned on it, and some months later, so then, again, I still haven't met these people. And I sent them an email, and I said, we're arriving like August 1st. And she said, well, the July 28th, we leave for vacation, but I'll leave you my house keys and my car keys. Again, like, I'm a stranger. And she's leaving me her house keys and her, like, you know, this could, anything could have happened, right? So I get to the airport, somebody meets us, brings us home. We move into this house that we've never been to before, and we start going to the hospital. And eventually, Semenyo had the surgery first, right?
Yeah, I think so.
And then you did like a week or two later,
Yeah.
and so on. And so that's what happened. And that's how I got my first 2 spine patients. I came back, and another spine patient showed up. So I repeated the process, and I adopted him and added him to my insurance and got him surgery in Dallas as well. Okay, but serial adoption is probably not the answer to spine deformity in Ethiopia. So I needed to come up with a better idea. So then in 2005, I met the best spine surgeon in the world, okay? And his name is Ohene Boboachi. He's from Ghana. He moved to America, and at the time he was going back and forth between America and Ghana. An amazingly wonderful and talented human being. So we decided we could start working together. And so I raised some money. And then in April of 2006, I remember leaving my Passover Seder as early as I could to go to my office, because the next day I was putting 5 Ethiopian kids on the plane to Ghana for spine surgery. And Dr. Boachi flew in with a team from New York, and my team arrived, and they met, and we got 5 surgeries done. So we opened up I opened up my spine program that year, and that year we got 20 new spine patients. We did 11 surgeries. And I thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe how successful we are. And then we started doing more and more surgeries. So now we have done over 1,500 spine surgeries. We're getting over 500 new spine patients a year. I have the largest collection of the worst spine deformities in the world. We are raising money to put up a spine center in here. We are training Ethiopian doctors. Right now we have 1 Ethiopian surgeon in India who we're training. We have 2 Ethiopian surgeons going in a couple of weeks to India for their training. We have right now 4 patients in Ghana. We have 4 patients in India, and we have many more. Today I was in clinic all afternoon working on this. So my whole life now is taking care of kids with spine deformities. So I only wanted to help these 2 guys. I wasn't trying to be a spine doctor. I'm not trained as a spine doctor at all. And I just wanted to help these 2 Ethiopian boys. And now it turns out that I'm one of the top spine doctors in the whole world. Now, this is a Jewish group, and so I need to put Judaism into here. All my patients know that I'm a Jew. And I was at Mother Teresa's mission a while back, and I was going to Gondar. And I said to the nuns, I'm going to be in Gondar tomorrow. Do you have any mail for your sisters there? So they said, yeah, here's mail for the sisters, and here is $1,000 in Ethiopian money for them to manage the program. So they know I'm completely honest. So I walked into the Mother Teresa's mission in Gondar the next day, and I said, oh, hi, I'm here, and I have mail for you, and I'm Dr. Rick, and I have mail for you, and I have money for you. So the nun looked up, and she said, oh, it's you. I recognized you. And they said, yeah, they didn't tell you Dr. Rick was coming? And they said, oh, no, they didn't tell me your name. They just said the Jewish doctor is coming. So they don't even know my name. All they know is I'm the Jewish doctor. Okay, now, there's a Jewish doctor who is the Fox News medical correspondent, who's a bit of a friend of mine now. His name is Mark Siegel, and he interviewed me the other day for Sirius XM Doctor Radio. But he's writing a book on medical miracles. And he contacted me, and I sent him a list of 14 things that have happened in my life, and there's many more that I consider medical miracles. And so let me just share something with you, okay? I had a patient at Mother Teresa's mission who was a Muslim orphan who had a brain tumor which was popping her eye out. I'll show you the pictures tomorrow at my house. But it looks like she has an ice cream cone coming out of her eye. It was so profound and disfiguring. Now, whether it's cancer or not doesn't matter, because even if it's not cancer, it's going to squash the brain and kill the person. So I wanted to get her surgery, and I did pictures, and I took x-rays. Nobody would touch her. Well, I didn't know what to do. I was in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Every morning I do shachrit, and I put on tefillin, okay? I overslept. I didn't have time to put on tefillin. This happens to all of us sometimes, right? You throw your clothes on, brush your teeth, you run out the door. And in my case, I put my tefillin in my backpack. Later on, after my first meeting, I said to the guy taking me around, do me a favor, take me to a synagogue. I just want to put on tefillin properly. So I go to the synagogue, a Haredi synagogue in St. Louis Park, and I'm putting on my tefillin, and I said to the guy next to me, hello, and he says, hello. So this is just two strangers saying hello in synagogue, right? So I said, so what do you do here in Minneapolis? And he said, well, it's very specific. He said, I'm a skull-based neurosurgeon. And I said, oh, that's very interesting. And I said, let me show you something. So this is November in Minneapolis. I didn't want my computer to freeze, so I had my computer with me. So I opened up my computer, and I opened it up, and I showed him the pictures and the scans and the CAT scan and the MRI of this woman. And he said, oh my gosh, I've never seen anything like that. I would love to help her. Because of that chance meeting in synagogue, I ended up bringing her to him, and he operated, saved her life. She just had a kid. She is well. So this is a Muslim orphan raised by Catholic nuns, getting free surgery by Dr. Eric Nussbaum and his team at St. Joseph's Hospital in St. Paul, Minnesota. Now, if you had said to me, you know, it says in the Talmud, mitzvah goreret mitzvah, one mitzvah leads to another. If you had said to me the day before, Rick, be very careful to put on tefillin properly tomorrow because you're going to save the life of a Muslim orphan. If you had just told me that, I would have said, I'm going to put on tefillin, but that's impossible because I put on tefillin every day and I don't save any lives. But that's what happened. All I wanted to do is put on tefillin properly, and I ended up saving that woman's life. Now, that's part A of the story. Part B of the story happened a few weeks ago. I was flying to lecture at Stanford University, and being poor, I arrived at JFK, and I was going to sleep in the airport at night, okay? So I got off my Ethiopian Airlines flight. I walked into the transit lounge, you know, which is huge at JFK, and I was going to sleep there for the night. Now, the only thing, I had my carry-on, my luggage was checked through. I had my carry-on luggage, but inside my carry-on luggage is my tefillin. So I didn't want to bring my tefillin into the men's room. It's actually okay if it's double wrapped. Anyway, I'd prefer not to. So there was an El Al flight at the same time. I look over there. There's obviously an Orthodox couple. I walk over to them in their early 70s. And I said, excuse me, I need to use the men's room. Do me a favor, hold on to my tefillin. So he says, sure. Right? I mean, like, how many people, this is not a terrorist ploy. Like, how many people know this? You don't bring your tefillin into the men's room, past security, right? It's like, so he says, no problem. So when I walked out, he was walking in, and his wife was sitting there. So his wife gave me my tefillin back, and then she asked me a question. She said, do you live in Israel or do you live in New York? That is her world, by the way, okay? So she goes back and forth between New York and Israel. So they have houses in both places and so on. So I said, no, actually, I'm a doctor in Ethiopia. And she said, oh, you're a doctor? And I said, yeah. She says, I have something medical going on. And I said, what's going on? And she said, my heart is flip-flopping ever since this morning. So I took off my Apple Watch, I put it on her arm, and I did an EKG, okay? And I saw that her heart rate was 150, and it was irregular. And I said, this is a potentially dangerous arrhythmia. You should not be flying. So you need to not fly. She said, would you tell El Al that? I said, sure. So we walked to El Al, and I said, I'm a doctor, I just met them, but she should not be flying unless she's healthy, because it's a 13-hour nonstop flight over the Atlantic, right? Your heart stops. What are they going to do? So she says, I agree. So they take her off the flight, they took her luggage off the flight, and she went off, and she went into the hospital immediately. The only reason she got medical attention that night was because I wanted them to watch my tefillin. And if I didn't ask that, she would have gotten on the flight, and God knows what would have happened. So, I don't know what that means, but it means that somehow, if you put on tefillin, good things are going to happen. So with that, here's a question. What's the biggest mitzvah in the world? Tzedakah? That's up there. What else?
Loving your fellow Jew.
Loving your fellow Jew. Okay. I'm not going to argue with that. Any other ideas? What? Saving a life. That's pretty good. There's no right answer, obviously, and I'm not going to ever say any of these are not super important. The Rambam, who's a pretty good source, said the biggest mitzvah is freeing a hostage, because freeing a hostage is potentially saving a life. Okay, so I was thinking, my patients with their terrible spines, and they have spines like this and like this and like that, they are twisted and they are contorted, and they are basically being held hostage by their own bodies. And the work that I'm doing is somehow freeing them and giving them a new life. And it's just a different perspective on freeing a hostage, because we're all thinking about freeing hostages and praying for freeing hostages, but it's not the only kind of hostage there is. So, with that, you can ask me questions. Yes?
So do you work only with spines, or do you still do
Oh, so I was doing a lot of hearts and also treating kids for cancer. I'm doing a few hearts and a bit of cancer now, but at least 90% of what I do is spine.
So, sorry, follow-up question. So do you work with Save a Child's Heart and stuff like that?
I do. I have worked with Save a Child's Heart. I know them. I like them. Sure. Yes?
I kind of have a two-part question. You said when you finished college, I think it was, you didn't know what you wanted to do and you didn't have any money, but you said the only thing you thought to do was to be a doctor. Why was that?
Well, this is not what I thought right after college, but after I lived in Alaska for a couple of years and I had time to read and to think and reflect, I decided that's the best thing that I could do with my life.
That's my second part. I was like, why Alaska? Choose pre-med in Alaska, not somewhere else.
Well, one is I sort of go to extremes. The other is I like certain landscapes, and I like the Alaskan landscape, and I like cold weather.
That's why you live in Ethiopia.
Right. So you move south as you get older. I'm getting closer to the equator.
Florida, so people.
Yeah. Florida isn't there a commandment in the Torah? You have to move there when you turn about 75, right? Yes.
Do you, when you became a doctor, are you the only doctor for kids or also adults?
I trained in internal medicine, which is adult medicine. Yeah. But here I take care of all ages. I literally have 6 weeks old or 3-month-olds coming to me, and I have 60-year-olds coming to me. Most of my patients are between 5 and 20.
So is it just a lot? Is it just a lot less strict here for because I know
Well, I mean, the rule. There's no rule, even in America. There's no rule about who you are able to treat. Like the government knows very well what I do. Nobody cares that I'm an internal medicine doctor taking care of 5-year-olds. That's not an issue.
Okay, so like, did you always plan to work with kids? When you first went to medical school, did you want to work with kids or no?
I liked kids, but I didn't like babies. It bothered me. It bothered me to hear babies cry all the time. And I liked them when they looked more like human beings, like around 3 or so. Although I should say this, I trained in what's called primary care internal medicine. If I had to do it all over again now, I would do a 4-year program with internal medicine and pediatrics together.
Thank you so much. You're welcome to join us.
Where are you eating?
And also you can visit his website, drrickhodes.org.